Gonna do a quick video on replacing the HPOP reservoir gaskets. This is an 02 7.3. Very first thing, quick little warning. This big cavity here, that feeds straight into your HPOP. There, back here in this corner, you can't see it. There's a little hole in this housing, about maybe a little more than halfway down. It's not at the very bottom, it's part way down. Little hole that goes across to feed your HPOP. Anything that drops down in here is going to go right into your pump, probably do at least a little bit of damage from there. That junk will get pumped to your injectors, probably make them a little bit unhappy. So first thing I did was clean this whole area of the engine really well. You don't want any stuff to fall in there if you got some crusty crap, built up junk, or even just dust, dirt, normal stuff that sits on an engine. You don't want that to fall in there. As soon as you pull the reservoir off, I would suggest covering that with something, a lint-free rag or clean plastic glove, something that's not going to let any junk in there. Other easy options, just take your new gas, assuming you're working on a late model. Late model trucks have this little filter from 99.5 up. Early 99 and down does not have the filter, but if you've got a late model, pull the reservoir off. You could throw that thing right in there right away. That way, if anything falls in there, it'll sit in the screen. It'll be easy to see. You can just pop it out of the screen, or even leave it in there, but preferably get it out of the screen. So yeah, make sure it's clean. Be very careful not to get junk in there. So then, the reservoir. You're going to want to take this little plug out. It's an Allen head. I used a suction pump of one of those fluid evacuators. You want to empty this reservoir if you can. This is going to be full of oil up to about here. So if you don't drain it, you pop it off, you're going to have about a quart of oil just dump all over the place up there. So some people use like a turkey baster with a piece of hose to get down in there, suck it out, but try to suck it out if you can. Otherwise, you're going to have a mess. So once that's done, up here you got two bolts, 13mm head. They hold a fuel filter housing to that reservoir. The only thing holding it now is all the metal pipes. It's just going to sit there. Take those two out. The one on the right is somewhat behind a coolant hose, but it's not all that much in the way. You can pop it right out. The one on the left sits behind your exhaust back pressure valve or sensor. So you're going to want to take that off. I used a 1-inch deep socket. It sits right on that bracket there, right in that hole. So 1-inch deep socket for the sensor. Underneath that bracket is a hex. I think it's 9/16, didn't pay attention. You're going to want to put a wrench on there to hold that bracket assembly while you torque on your sensor, and that's just to make sure you don't bend this bracket. It's not very thick steel, it's sheet metal, kind of soft. If you bend that, you're also going to bend your exhaust back pressure feed tube. Might cause it to leak, could crack it, so be careful not to distort that little bracket. So once you get these two out, I forgot to set this up. Sitting on these bolts is this bracket. This is where your plastic beauty cover is that covers the fuel filter. Take that guy out. There's going to be a 13mm lock nut in each of those top studs. Take the bracket off. Then you've got your reservoir. These two are 13, these two are 10mm. Take those 5 bolts out, and I just kind of pushed and pulled on this. It popped off, it was kind of stuck. Once I got it out, so pulled the bolts off, pulled the reservoir out, then there's going to be 6 torque screws in these holes. Pull those out, top cover was pretty well stuck, so I used a really thin, sharp gasket scraper, stuck the edge right in there, give it a little tap with a wrench. That popped the cover off. The gaskets themselves, well, I'm not going to pull that back out. I'm leaving it there as my little safeguard. I said mine is a late model, so these will be the gaskets for, I believe it's $19.99 and a half and up. So this is the gasket I got, Ford branded. I bought both of my gaskets. Actually, I'll show this one. This is the top cover gasket. It's an international number. I bought mine from Reservoir, Diesel Performance. They have the absolute best price I could find on these. Better than Amazon, much better than walking into a Ford dealer, and they're proper factory parts. Shipping was fast. I believe I ordered this Monday night or maybe Tuesday. I think it was probably Monday I ordered it, and it showed up in today's mail. It's Thursday, so pretty quick, really cheap. The shipping, I paid $8 for faster shipping. I think the slower shipping was like $6.50. But yeah, even with shipping, it was cheaper than buying it through Amazon, and I've got Prime. It was much cheaper. So anyways, once you get it out, you're of course going to want to clean this thing up real good. I've got the insides all nice and pretty and shiny. Get it all cleaned up, put your gaskets in place, make sure your gasket surface is nice and clean, inside that groove all the way around. Bolt it all up. I do not know the torque specs. I wish I had checked so I could give you those. I can't help you with that. You're going to have to find them yourself. Bolt it all up. Then you're going to want to take a small funnel, nice clean funnel, no junk in it, no plastic burrs hanging off the edge waiting to fall off. Stick a little funnel in there. You're going to want to pre-fill this with motor oil, otherwise you might have a really long cranking time to get it refilled and get the engine to start. Pre-fill it, about 1 quart should be all it takes. If you put in more, it'll just drain down into the engine. You can't really overfill this. If you pour a bunch in there real fast, it'll fill up and it'll drop back down to wherever its normal level is, so not much to worry about there. Yeah, get it filled up, stick your plug back in, and it should be good to go. Now, beyond that, I'm going to talk a little bit about this Reservoir, because I tried doing some searching about it and I couldn't find much info on these things. One thing that I remember kind of stood out to me, somebody on one of the forums was asking about tapping and threading this cover or maybe the side of the housing to install an oil pressure gauge. And in theory that would work, because this is being fed by your low pressure oil pump, so it should read engine pressure, except this tube here, and I don't know if you'll be able to see, yeah, you can see it's got a really small hole there. That is an air bleed for this thing. So if when oil level, if the oil level were to drop down, when you start your engine, it'll be able to fill back up. Any excess air will leave the reservoir through there, so your oil level will be all the way up there, and it stays all the way up there. If there's any air bubbles that come in, they'll get blown right back out of there. So since that has that bleed, I don't think this is going to give you an accurate oil pressure reading. I mean, maybe it will, as long as the oil flow is high enough that it can overcome the loss through that little hole, but I wouldn't count on it to be accurate. A couple other things. So the way this works, and this is all me figuring it out, I can't be guaranteeing anything. From what it appears, oil from the low pressure oil pump comes up through this hole and through this other small hole. Let's see here now, where was I? Oh yeah, so oil is coming up. The big hole there leads to this tube type thing that's in here. So oil is going to come up through here, spill out, and fill this whole reservoir up. the oil coming up through that smaller one there is going to come up through this large area, and you can see the hole is kind of offset. It comes up through that large galley or whatever you want to call it there, spills out through this rectangular shaped thing right onto your cam gear. So basically it's coming out of here, going way up, and then falling right back down on top of the cam gear to keep it nice and lubed. The oil level, the sustained oil level in this thing doesn't completely make sense to me, because generally when you have one of these on your engine and you turn your engine off, you take that plug off and the oil level is like quarter inch, half inch down. I don't know why, because the only place I can see that oil can get out of here is through the high pressure pump while it's running, or through this little bleed orifice. But this bleed orifice is up above the gasket surface, extending up into the cover. So it should always keep the oil level pretty close to the top cover, but that's not generally the case. It's usually down, I don't know, quarter inch, half inch, hard to tell when you're looking through the hole. So I don't know, maybe after you shut the engine off, a small amount just comes through the low pressure pump. I don't know. Or maybe because my gasket was a little leaky, it was just dropping on its own. Maybe the oil level would stay up right up next to the hole, but most people seem to say it's a little bit below that hole in the top cover. So I'm not sure where it drops down, why it drops down, but it does. They shouldn't drop any more than that. It should always stay relatively full. Realistically, as long as the oil level doesn't drop all the way down to where this reservoir becomes empty, the truck is going to start, because it's going to have some oil in there for the HPOP to pick up. Oh, these gaskets. So the late model one, like I said earlier, has a screen. The early model ones do not have a screen. I believe the gasket shape is the same, but it doesn't have the screen. If you were to put this late model gasket onto an early model engine, there's not enough room for this little assembly here. This is steel. It's got a steel piece holding the screen. It's all like fused to the rubber. You put it on, everything will seem to fit. Your bolts will drop in. When you tighten it up, you'll end up snapping off the front cut. This whole piece here is your engine's front cover. It's one big huge aluminum housing, covers the whole front of the motor. So with this thing in here, and being the wrong type for the early models, this piece will break off, and I've seen pictures of a few where guys didn't know, or maybe they thought, hey, I'm going to upgrade and have the screen, sounds great. There's not enough room for it in the early models, and you will break that piece off as you start to tighten it up. So make sure, if you've got a 99, make sure you know if it's early or late model. I got these from Riffraff. I know Riffraff I'm almost sure if you give them your VIN number, they can look it up, or they'll just, check your date code. Make sure you get the right one if you have a 99 truck. As far as I know, everything past 99 is going to be this. Everything before 99 is going to be the other stuff. If you have a 99, there's a whole bunch of mid-year changes. This thing, and there's just a slew of stuff that changed in the middle of 99, so you got to be careful with those trucks. I think that pretty much covers this. It's already gone on longer than I wanted. I'm probably forgetting stuff, but well, I'm not going to remember right away, so I'm going to cut this now.